here hosting live. Kind of let time slip away from me. And I think that should do it. Okay, we are live on YouTube. So if you are in an area that is not here, that if you are across the country, we certainly want you to be able to tune in and be a part of the study. And this evening we certainly do have an interesting study for you. We're going to be looking at some more of the Humanist Manifesto. If you've been watching the shows in the past, you know that while the gentlemen from the South Central Carolina were preaching, while they were up here for the tent meeting, I, Hewlin MacGyver, we were on the program together, and we were discussing some of the things from that. And the reason why I want to visit again some of the topics from the Humanist Manifesto is because of some of the other research that I have been following as I have been doing more research or more study on some of the things going on in the public school system. And friends, and especially brethren, if we are wanting to get our nation back on track, there are a lot of people, they are certainly worried about where our future as a country is going to head. Especially, you know, for those that have children and that are involved in rearing those children and trying to bring them up in the best way that they know how. We need to make sure that we are giving our children the best opportunity that they have to succeed. And I'm going to lay out some information this evening that, in fact, you might be part of the problem in the massive problem that we're having as a country and as a whole. And that problem being if you are sending your students to schools. And again, we're going to bring out some evidences. We're going to do some research together. We're going to study together what the Bible actually has to say about educating our children and who is to be involved in that, whose responsibility is it. And I believe that's definitely one of the problems that we are having in our country is that those that are supposed to be in charge are not wanting to be in charge. And I think this program here that is allowing me to control another computer is giving me some issues in doing my PowerPoint, so I might actually have to start doing that so that we can go on with our normal programming. I hope that is not the case because I definitely want y'all to be able to view along with us. And I think we're going to have to do that. This is just not working. Well, it is working. It's just not working on my screen. Anyways, we'll try to get through this the best that we can. Let me get this synced up, hopefully. But as always, we want to make sure that you are able to contact us. Dad is currently in Chicago. He had to go back for another checkup, and we hope they are having safe travels while they are on their way up there. But you can reach him when he returns at 276-806-2150. Also, you can reach me at 434-429-5221, or you can email at danvillecoc@gmail.com. Our brother Eugene Edwards, he has offered his telephone number, 276-806-6922. If we can assist you in any way, Bible studies, if you need tracts, you need Bible study material, we're going to be advertising the book as we have been for the last few weeks, possibly going on a month now, Muscle and the Shovel. This is the congregation for the brethren there in Danville, Virginia. You can reach Mark at 434-770-8412, or you can assemble with these brethren at 120 American Legion Boulevard, Danville, Virginia, or you can email Mark at mkmcminnis@danvillechurchofchrist.net. Also, the brethren in Eden. James Oldfield is the evangelist there, and he has a program here on the regional station called Word from the Lord, Thursday nights at 9 p.m. The brethren meet in Eden at 9:10 a.m. for Bible class and worship assembly. Thursday, 7 p.m. for the midweek Bible study. You can reach James at 276-340-2653 or 336-394-5721, or email James at awordfromthelord@gmail.com. And some good news coming out of the congregation there at Eden, North Carolina. They had a baptism this morning. They had an individual come to the assembly. I don't know if James had been studying this couple previously, but he heard the things that were presented, and he wanted to obey the gospel as it is recorded in the Bible. He heard the truth, he believed it, he repented, confessed Jesus Christ to be the Son of God, and he was immersed, he was baptized for the remission of his sins, so that he could be added to the church. And we now have a new brother in the Eden congregation there. And I know from the post that James made on Facebook that his wife, the gentleman that obeyed the gospel, his wife is currently reading A Muscle and a Shovel. So we are hopeful that she too will soon be ready to put on our Lord in baptism, that she can be called our sister and she can be a member of the Lord's church. I also want to advertise for Arise to Truth, the radio program coming out of Elizabethton, Tennessee. I want to advertise for them because they made a plug for us this evening for what does the Bible say in our discussion that we're going to be having on the public school system and the trouble that we're having in America. Arise to Truth, Tuesdays and Thursdays, live 2 to 3 p.m., and that's Eastern Time. Also, if you are interested and you have some free time and you're just scrolling through the internet, they have archived programming. Some of those go back to I believe the one that 1989, 1988, and Wesley Simon there, the gentleman in the coat and tie, he is the director of the Tri-City School of Preaching in Elizabeth, Tennessee, where Caleb and Mark are attending school. Also, Drew Leonard, you met him last Sunday. He was on with Dad. Tim Phillips, there in the center, he does the radio program with Wesley. And the gentleman in the red is Eddie Kraft. All of these individuals are instructors at the Tri-City School of Preaching, fine brethren, and if you're listening to radio or you're wanting to hear some good Bible teaching, tune them in Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 3 p.m. And if you have a question, they'll give you telephone numbers that you can call and that you can ask your questions live on the radio, live on their show. So please do not be afraid to give them a call. Also, Wednesday evenings, for those in the community that are elderly and do not like to get out at night, you have a problem driving at night, the Stony Creek Church of Christ offers a Wednesday night Bible class via the internet. If you go to new.livestream.com/WNBS Wednesday night Bible study live, or if you just typed in the Stony Creek Church of Christ, their website will come up and this link will be on their website. They offer this for people that are shut in or that are not feeling well to go to services. They might have communicable disease that they're not wanting to spread around. This is offered to you that if you're still wanting to have a Bible study, you just cannot get out. We do not encourage people to abuse this extension of their worship assembly. This is something that they are doing out of the goodness of their heart, and if you have the opportunity to assemble, you need to make sure that you are assembling. But if you are not able, then this is for you. They want you to be able to study your Bible even if you do not have the opportunity to get out. Also, as we mentioned, Muscle and a Shovel, we have copies of this free of charge to those that are interested, describing one man's journey out of man-made false doctrine into the truth that is found in the Bible. I believe this individual, I still have not had the chance to read it yet. I have somebody borrowing my copy. And the gentleman that's being discussed in this book, he was a Baptist. He was moving up fairly well and fairly quickly in the Baptist religion. But upon contact with a member of the church and beginning to ask him questions, well, he was getting his question answered, and he was going around to other preachers trying to have the preachers answer the questions. And he came to find that, guess what? These other preachers, they cannot answer my questions like a member of the Church of Christ can. He ended up obeying the gospel, and we are seeing many people being converted because of his story, being able to relate with him. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are picking up this book and reading it, and as they're reading about this man, they're looking at themselves and saying, you know what, this is me. And being able to relate with him, they're able to make the changes that are necessary so they can be called Christians and that they can be saved and be found in the right way. This evening, our discussion, we will be discussing infant sacrifice today. And as you can see, I have a question mark. I'm asking the question, are we still involved in infant sacrifice today? And you might be sitting at home and you might be thinking, what in the world is he talking about? There is no way that we as Americans, and how highly developed and how well educated we are, that we would be so naive, that we would be so ignorant to go back into a practice that is purely demonic, that is nothing but idolatrous within its nature. I believe by the time we are finished with our study this evening, that you are going to see very clearly and without a shadow of a doubt that we are still involved in infant sacrifice today. That is, that we are still offering up our children on an altar. But the God to whom they are being offered might surprise you. If you go back and you study in the children of Israel's history, you'll find in Jeremiah chapter 32 and verse 34 that the children of Israel here are being condemned by the prophet Jeremiah, and for their punishment, they're going to go into Babylonian captivity. Notice what Jeremiah says, Jeremiah 32 and verse 4. But they set their abominations in the house which is called by my name to defile it. Now here they are still in Jerusalem, they're still in the promised land, and a lot of people, they are involved in some of these heinous acts inside the house of God, inside the house which is called by my name. Verse 35. And the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire unto Molech, which I commanded them not, neither came, have to play around with some things here so as we can read together. And I believe I know what it is that's throwing me off. I'm using a new outsource box, and I think it's changed some of my settings for my PowerPoint. But verse 35 says there, and they built the high places of Baal, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire unto Moloch, which I commanded them not, neither came into my mind this abomination to cause Judah. So here the prophet Jeremiah is actually describing, when, the practice in which you are involving yourself this time in causing your sons and your daughters to pass through the fire unto a false god. This is a sin. Verse 36 goes on to say, and now therefore thus the Lord, the God of Israel, concerning this city, whereof ye say, it shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon by the sword and by the famine and by the pestilence. Friends, what I'm actually seeing, and brethren, those of you who are members of the Lord's Church and might be viewing this evening, what I am gleaning from this text is that if you are going to be so defiled, you're going to become so impure, so full of iniquity that you would actually sacrifice your young people. You're willing to use them in false worship, that you're able to abuse them in sinner. God is actually going to end up bringing you to the lowest point. How could a people misuse a creation of God, something that is purely innocent, that is pure from any type of sin and any type of iniquity? The false doctrine of born in sin, inheriting Adam's sin, is not found within the Scriptures. The psalmist would, when they were involved in these practices, they were shedding innocent blood. Now, how could it write that they were shedding innocent blood if they were born in sin? It just doesn't lie. The logic, the reason is not there. So for these individuals, for the children of God, His chosen people, the Hebrews, the Israelites, to be involved in such a practice, notice what their punishment was. To lose their young children, their young ones, is going to end up bringing them into captivity by the sword and by the famine and by the pestilence. Now, friends, what makes you think that America is going to be able to escape any type of punishment? Part of the problem that we have dealing with the public school system and how our country is run, and the reason why people continue to be involve themselves in this type of practice, is because their patriotism is greater than their love of God. Their love of country, their love of government goes beyond what their love for God is supposed to be. And they continue to offer their children up on the altar of the public school system. Notice, if you will, the image that I have here for you on this PowerPoint. First, in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 21, we find the first mention that they were not supposed to be involved in infant sacrifice. Then in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 30, we have them building an altar to Toloth, 30 and 31. And then in Jeremiah 19 and verse 5, he brings up this situation again. You might be asking yourself, well, this already sounds bad. This depiction sounds bad. Well, I'm going to give you a clear picture as to exactly what was involved in these sacrifices. It was not simply, just taking their children and throwing them into a fire. But instead, they built an altar, something similar to this, and the image would have been made out of some type of metal, either, brass or maybe some type of copper, or they had the ability to work with aluminum. Some of them did, but either way, it was some type of metal that was able to withstand great heat. And as you can see from this picture, the image, Molech or Balaam or Tolof, whoever it was, would be sitting, and their hands would be outstretched so as to receive the infant. And as is depicted here in this photo, or this artist rendering of what they believe was taking place, you had a fire being made and kept going underneath those hands. So essentially what you had going on was you were placing your infant, your child, onto these hands, and you were cooking them. You are, in a sense, you are grilling this child alive. And we ask ourselves, how could a people be so deprived that they do such a thing to innocent children? And I want the same question to be asked as we look at this information. We're going to notice several documentaries, some things that are going on in the public school system, and I want you to ask yourself the question, how can I continue to do this to my young children? Sending them into a place that is full of wickedness, that is being ruled by people who have no respect for God's authority, where God is being completely removed from the picture, putting them in a place where they're being influenced by other peers who their parents have no regard for what the Bible says or how they're supposed to live lives, and think that my child is going to be okay. And then for us to think as a nation, as a whole, that we are going to be okay when we are doing this to our children, and Israel was involved in a similar practice, and they were taken off into captivity. Friends, this is a dire situation in which we find ourselves today dealing with the public school system. Infant sacrifice today is still going on, and the altar is our public schools. Our public schools are doing nothing but hurting the progress that we could be making as a country if we would only teach them correctly. I want to show now a documentary entitled Indoctrination. This evening we're only going to notice the first 30 minutes of this documentary, and if it is something that is interesting to you, then you can find this on the internet and you can view it on your own. But friends, I believe that you are going to be very surprised with the information that is being stated in this documentary. I played this information in a Bible class with the group in Martinsville, and I'm just going to have to take a moment here and adjust some things here, because this is just getting on my last nerve, not being able to flow properly as I'm used to. So let me do some figuring out here exactly what I'm needing to do. Let's see. Let's go to View. Nope, Slideshow. All right, that is off there. And let's see here. Not sure where I'm needing to go. Just messing me all kinds of up and down. But anyways, I guess we'll just have to make do with what we have here. And I apologize for the choppiness this evening. Here's the documentary, Indoctrination. And Matt, if you want to, this is about a 30-minute clip. So when I get this going, if you just want to make me disappear, that'll be perfectly fine.
They're everywhere. We hear them rattle up and down the streets of our towns and cities. 480,000 of them. They have become almost invisible to us as they shuttle 26 million impressionable minds to our public schools every day. America's future is being shifted and remolded through our public school system. Tomorrow's voters and leaders are being guided and instructed in today's classrooms. But whose doctrine is being taught? The bus represents a story that has everything to do with where our nation came from and where it is going. This is a story of our children. This is the story of the big yellow bus. This is the story of indoctrination.
6 years ago, we came together to pass the No Child Left Behind Act. And today, no one can deny its results.
Stupid in America. That's a nasty title.
14 countries rank higher on reading ability than the U.S.
And the urgent task of fixing America's failing schools.
A third of our kids are dropping out.
The American education system badly needs improvement.
Just last week, schools got $10 billion in emergency government funding.
Video of a school beating caught on tape.
There have been 6 suicides in our school district.
Tampa police are investigating a report of a rape at Jefferson High School.
Clearly one of the defining issues of our day, education has become a hot topic. People from every political persuasion are engaging in public debate, blaming the growing crises in everything from teachers' unions to uninvolved parents, insufficient funding. Can the system be fixed, or do we abandon it? Even the church seems divided over how to respond to the growing academic and moral threats in public schools.
When you send that child off to school today, you're sending them into a society. When you criticize the Word of God, criticize the Lord Jesus Christ, just degrade Christian faith altogether and teach those practices that the Bible states very clearly are ungodly, unacceptable, and condemned by God, that's what you're sending your child into.
I don't think there's anything else that 90% of Christians do. Together, same choice. Fight to the death over which Bible you're going to use, okay? Which denomination you're going to be a part of. Duke it out there too. But 90% make the exact same educational choice. And nobody can point to book, chapter, and verse to justify it.
I move the passage of resolution number 2 on the secularization of our culture.
Here we're watching a debate on the floor of the largest evangelical denomination in America. The side wants an exodus from the government schools, giving the highest priority to the purity and discipleship of their own children.
2 years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention Council on Family Life reported that within a very short time of reaching the age of 18, in other words, finishing high school, leaving home, 88% leave the church not to return.
I agree that we have a responsibility to make sure they are being taught the things of God. But that responsibility lies upon the mom and the dads of our home, and we cannot give the rest of our children to the public schools. That's our responsibility.
The other side wants just the opposite, an even greater involvement in the public schools, giving the priority to witnessing to the children of unbelievers.
If we pull our and godly teachers away from this world, then the darkness will completely overtake the schools, and the heart of children will spoil as the salt is removed.
Later that day, 2 influential Southern Baptist leaders took the stage. First, Al Mohler, head of one of the largest seminaries in the world, who is arguably the leading Baptist theologian in America.
Teach your children, teach believers, teach followers of the Lord Jesus Christ the faith. They're not going to get it by osmosis.
In his book Culture Shift, he wrote, "The time has come for Christians to develop an exit strategy from the public schools."
I want to see...
This is Franklin Graham, son of the famous Billy Graham.
...a child, at least one child, in every class, in every public school in America, who is trained as a witness for Jesus Christ. Let's don't surrender to public schools. Let's take them back.
This is the debate we need to settle, with sincere Christians on both sides asking, should we protect our children by withdrawing them from the public schools, or should we leave them in the system to try to influence the schools for the better? My name is Colin Gunn, and as a Christian homeschooled dad and raised in Scotland, There's plenty that I need to learn American school system to better understand this hotly listed issue. So my wife Emily and I thought we'd take family on a little field trip from her native Texas all across the great USA. It's time to load up the guns and hit the road. We found the perfect bus on Craigslist. There's a surprising market for old school buses, primarily hippies, tailgaters, deer hunters, and of course, the occasional filmmaker.
Welcome, my friends, to the Generation Radio Broadcast. Captain Swanson, your host, with you today. Father of 5, we homeschool our children out here in the Eastern Plains of Colorado. Colin Gunn, who is a film producer. And Colin, you've come by to do some recording for your up-and-coming documentary, Indoctrination. And this is really the belly of the beast. When it comes down to it, you went after this.
Indeed, as a filmmaker, I have to go to other people to find out the truths, and we've been traveling America in a big yellow school bus, which has been our theme for the movie.
So you live in this thing?
Yeah, well, we tried not to, but we had to for 3 weeks, and we traveled around America. The kids had a great time, and one of the things we liked, antithesis, we're ironically using the school bus, showing the freedom and the liberty that you have as a homeschool family.
We're just heading to Dallas. This will be fun for the whole family. Quite a trip in the bus. 6 miles an hour, but I think we're going to enjoy it.
This is me at the age of 5. Like most Scottish kids, I trotted off to school, carrying my satchel, to what would probably be the most life-changing event of my childhood. I had an average experience at school. My unimpressive grades testify partly to a lack of personal motivation, but also I believe the school system's inability to inspire. Looking back at my public schooling brings back many memories, both good and bad. When I remember some of the bad things from those years, the bullying, dreary classrooms, and even the bad influences of some of my peers, I start to think of the alternative education that weren't readily available to my parents' generation. When Emily and I started having our own kids, we had to decide what we wanted to do for them. We wanted the very best for them, raise them in the faith and protect them from some of the things we've been exposed to. So we decided to educate them all. Now I know that parents who send their children to public schools love their children too, and want the very best for them as well. But what is it that parents should expect by putting them on the bus today?
The Scottish aspect of marriage.
Many of the people who are part of this project, like my wife Emily and Joaquin, my co-director, share very similar negative schooling experiences, even though we all have different backgrounds. But a recent graduate of the public schools gave us a fresh insider perspective.
I attended public schools from kindergarten through 12th. I was in a very good school district. My high school was consistently ranked among the top 200 in the country.
Emily, a young lady from a Christian home who went to one of those all heard about.
My parents had always been involved in my education, even if it was, just buying newspapers for me to read or buying. And my parents said, we don't want you in the classroom for the lessons on homosexuality and AIDS. So I was one of 2 students, 60, who got pulled out for that. But it didn't matter because, of course, we were all in the same class the rest of the day, and I learned everything that had been in there at recess. And by the end of 5th grade, most of my friends had boyfriends. Even though our school was supposed to teach abstinence, in practice that did not happen. The closest we got is some people are abstinent before marriage. Now let's talk about what everyone else does.
But by the time they get partway through high school, the stats show almost half will have had sex, many with multiple partners, and many without a condom. Chancellor Dennis says the new curriculum will stress abstinence, but the reality is many don't abstain.
People pregnant this year, and then the next week, like, there's 9 people pregnant this year, and then there was...
Officials have their work cut out for them. They're now considering a plan to provide birth control services at the school in the fall. But their biggest challenge? How to change the mindset of some of the girls who come here.
Sex in schools has become one of the biggest concerns for parents.
The Provincetown School Department has approved a plan to distribute condoms in both the high school and the elementary school. Parents will not be told if their child requests a condom, and they will not be allowed to prohibit their children from receiving one.
They could say it, but we would.
A parent can't call and say, hey, I don't want my 6-year-old to get a condom. And two,
Six-year-old.
So crazy it's hard to believe. And if you think this can happen in your school, look at one of the creative ways in which Planned Parenthood is reaching out to children. Once upon a time, the infamous child catcher of Bulgaria used similar tactics to lure little children away from their parents.
Here we are, children. Come and get your lollipops. Lollipops. Come and get your one.
Sex in the schools has become so common, it's not a problem amongst the children. According to the Department of Education's own nationwide investigation, nearly 10% of public school students have been targeted with unwanted sexual attention by school staff. Most people have a hard time believing this could happen in their child's school, until it does.
That's every, by the way. Doesn't matter where they're from, doesn't matter who they are. Their schools are different. That's what a lot of folks used to say, for example, in Port Neches, Texas. And they pride themselves on their schools there in Port Neches, Texas. You know, Port Arthur, Texas is real close to Port Neches. Port Arthur, that's where those people live. You know, large numbers of blacks and Hispanics, poor people, that's where their schools are. Port Neches is different. Port Neches is it's rather wealthy compared to Port Arthur. Their schools are different. It's true, which is why one of their principals of a Port Neches elementary school was caught in a sting in the middle of a park soliciting boys for sex. He also happened to be a deacon at a local Port Neches Baptist church. So I'm sure it's there went around saying, our schools are different. Our principal is not only a Christian, he's a deacon. Good for them.
I was shocked when I was 11, and I heard of some middle school who I was talking with who had had an abortion, and I had only recently learned what an abortion was.
Along with exposure to premarital sex, drugs are maybe the next biggest concern. According to a recent report, nearly half of all American high school students smoke, drink alcohol, or use illicit drugs.
Drugs and alcohol are a problem in middle school, which I think is long before many parents even think to have a conversation with their children about when the legal drinking age is.
If there are drugs in most American schools, just visit your local police station.
Rough cluster of some marijuana here. Prescription drugs, pills are a favorite. They take them out of the parents' medicine cabinets.
That's one stash from one high school seized in one day.
A show of hands if you've ever known anyone to be high in school. Everybody.
But then again, it's so hard because it's so common now.
And it's not illegal drugs that are concerning a lot of parents today. It's the schools themselves are pushing on the kids, especially boys. After all, the ideal in an American classroom is the one who sits and behaves without showing any signs of masculinity. Author and attorney Bruce shared some of these issues in his book, The Harsh Truth About Public Schools.
Nobody really knows what the long-term effects of any of these medications are on young developing bodies and minds. What you have is probably the largest uncontrolled drug experiment in the history of the world, and I'm afraid that it's doing enormous damage, particularly to boys in the schools.
And then there's the issue of school violence.
I saw a gun on the bus for the first time when I was 12. I was in 7th grade. We were coming home from school, and a boy on my bus had a handgun, which scared me to death. And this is in a public school that's ranked in the top 200 in the country. And on paper, I looked like a great product of the public schools. I was a national AP scholar. I did the International Baccalaureate program, graduated with very high GPA, but inside I was dying, and I was absolutely spiritually broken by the time I graduated from 12th grade.
So even in the good schools, the same problems of promiscuity, drugs, and violence all exist. A recent Gallup poll showed that 77% of parents give their child's school an A or a B performance rating, while 79% of Americans in general give the nation's public schools a C. In other words, everybody knows that the schools are terrible, but parents insist on believing that their child's school is doing better than most other schools.
It's amazing to me that parents are willing to admit that there are these problems and yet believe that their children will somehow escape. They won't. If they end up being Christian after graduating from high school, that will be a real accomplishment in and of itself. At my high school, there was so much pressure to give up your Christian values if you happen to be Christian. I certainly never admitted I was a Christian in high school, and I told one person that I wasn't. And to my shame, I still have a hard time admitting that today. But I will admit that if it helps parents make the decision about where to send their children or how to educate their children.
The Bible says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. It also tells us that pure and undefiled religion involves keeping yourself unspotted from the world. All of us who have been to public schools know that within the confines of the playground, this is an impossibility. According to a
All right, not really sure why that cut off like that. For some reason, it's wanting to start back over. I'm not liking that. Let's see here. Oh, if I can grab a hold of it there. And I'll get us queued back up to where we were so that we can finish that. And friends, I hope that this is an eye-opener for you. When I first came in contact with the book, and then I found out that it was a documentary. And after watching the documentary and reading through the book, friends, I cannot believe what it is that our country is actually becoming. Our country is becoming nothing more than another socialist experiment, nothing more than a communistic type of society. And we're going to notice excerpts from the book. I'm having a hard time seeing. This presenter mode has me messed up, and I can't see what I'm clicking and what I'm dragging, what I'm not dragging. But we have become nothing more than a communistic type of society that, in fact, our mentality, the whole design for public schools was initially founded in the country of Prussia. Now, you might not be familiar with Prussia because we know it as Germany. And Germany, you know, with Hitler and the Nazi movement and everything that they were involved in there, it's no wonder that our young people, our children, are becoming very similarly minded as they were. All right, I'm working on getting this queued up for everybody, and I apologize for that happening. I believe we were about right in here.
Yay, but inside I was dying, and I was absolutely spiritually broken by the time I graduated grade.
So even in the good schools, the same problems of promiscuity, drugs, and violence all exist. A recent Gallup poll showed that 77% of parents give their child's school an A or a B performance rating, while 9% of Americans in general give the nation's public schools a C. In other words, everybody knows that the schools are terrible, but parents insist on believing that their child's school is doing better than most other schools.
It's amazing to me that parents are willing to admit that there are these problems and yet believe that their children will somehow escape. They won't. If they end up being Christian after graduating from high school, that will be a real accomplishment in and of itself. At my high school, there was so much pressure to give up your Christian values if you happen to be Christian. I certainly never admitted I was a Christian in high school, and I told one person that I wasn't. And to my shame, I still have a hard time admitting that today. But I will admit that if it helps parents make the decision about where to send their children or how to educate their children.
The Bible says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. It also tells us that pure and undefiled religion involves keeping yourself
All right, man, I guess if you just want to come back to me, it's not one to... Not sure if it's a bad connection on the internet or if I have too many programs running at one time or what is happening. I certainly do apologize if that is not going to finish out for us, but if I can get this back over to my screen, I will definitely tell you the link to where you can this documentary on your own time, and I certainly do encourage you to do so because, friends, it just gets worse from there. The things that are going on in the public school system. I mean, I personally went to public school through the 8th grade, and though I did not have any problem standing up for my Christian beliefs and what the Bible actually says, the influence that the public school actually had on me, I sincerely wish that I could have missed out on those type of things. I learned my first dirty joke on the school bus ride to middle school. My sister, while she was enrolled at Fieldale Collinsville, while the high school was there at the time, that's where she saw her first unfiltered R-rated movie in the public school system. My little brother, when in the 1st or the 2nd grade, hearing from another classmate about encounters that the classmate's older brother and his girlfriend were having in a sexual manner. And this was being spread around, this was being told. He got pulled into the principal's office in the 1st grade because this type of information is being given. And you heard, several different preachers at the beginning, and I would like to say as well, I meant to make this statement before the clip, but everything going awry got me distracted. I do not at all condone everything that was made mention of in this documentary, especially those upheld by the Southern Baptist Convention. But there were some things that were said that just cannot be ignored. How that over 80% of children, by the time they reach 18, their statistics are showing within the Southern Baptist Convention that young people are leaving the church. We, as a country, we're sitting around, scratching our heads, trying to figure out, why is it that we're losing so many young people? Why is it that we cannot get young people interested in spiritual things? Well, part of the reason why is because you're sending them to public school and they're around heathens. I know we give Mr. Charles Stanley a difficult time on this program, but I have to agree with him in the statement that he made that when you are putting your child on the school bus, on a public school bus, you are sending them into a pagan world, an ungodly world. You might as well, just as the Israelites were offering up their children on the altar there to Molech, you might as well be slitting your own child's throat. You heard Franklin Graham say that he wants to see, at least one in every school. Friends, that's just idiotic. That is, that's stupidity gone to seed. To think that, okay, we're going to send our young children and they are going to be able to stand against adults in upholding their personal beliefs or their beliefs and their faith as Christians. The Catholic Church actually tried that at one point. Some of you might be familiar with the Children's Crusade, when Catholicism was at its supreme, when it was at its pinnacle, and they were trying to conquer the Holy Land. They were trying to send all these different crusades to overtake Jerusalem and bring it back under Christian rule. One of the efforts that actually got sent out to Jerusalem to go to battle and try to take the city of Jerusalem from the Turks was that a group of children were actually sent over there to the Middle East to try to do battle against grown adults. Now, I understand that from 2 Timothy chapter 2, we are encouraged, or Paul encourages Timothy, and we can be encouraged by Paul in that he says in verse 1, "Thou therefore, my son, be strong in grace and that is in Christ Jesus, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses. The same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man that warreth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier. And if a man also strive for masteries, yet is he not crowned except he strive lawfully." So of course we can find from Scripture that we are supposed to be soldiers of Christ. But friends, let's think about this logically. Does a person just sign up for the military and then boom, they're a soldier and they're ready to go to war? Or do they not have to go through some type of training? Everybody knows about boot camp. Everybody knows about basic training. They have to be properly trained before they can be sent out to do battle. Now, why in the world do you think that you can send an infant, 7, 8, 9 years old, into a realm that is completely pagan and completely against God, and think that they are going to be able to hold their own, stand toe-to-toe against Satan and against those that would try to demean what it is that they have been taught at home? You're just destined to fail. You are destined to lose your young child, because a young child's mind is impressionable. It is one that is ready to receive information, and it's very trusting. Why in the world would they at all think that my teacher, somebody that that I have, that my parents have trust in me, which actually you're putting your trust in a complete stranger. You are sending your child to an institution 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, to be taught by people that you do not even know. And you saw from the beginning part of the documentary, the schools are actually implementing practices that if you wanted to oppose them, the school is not even going to listen to you. Friends, what is happening to our country? We are losing our rights as Americans, and we are becoming a communist country. Socialist to the core. And it's all being promoted, it's all being indoctrinated, it's being pushed through the public school system. The reason why they're going through the public school system is because I'm at the age now where they're not going to get me. And a lot of the viewers that are viewing this evening, possibly in your late mid-30s, early 40s, into your 50s and your 60s, they're not get you either, because you know what it means to have your rights, and you supposedly know what it means to stand up for your rights. So what their plan is, okay, we cannot get these adults. Well, we're going to establish an institution, and we're going to bring in their children, and guess what? We're going to teach their children the way we want them to think. And in fact, we are so going to ridicule the parents, and again, I apologize for not being aware of this presenter mode that's going to be forced on me. I had several clips of some quote-unquote highly educated Richard Dawkins, Bill Nye the Science Guy, Laurence Krauss, and I'm going to let you hear some of the things that they had to say about those parents that would actually teach their children that, you know what, the Bible is true. That in fact the earth is not more than 10,000 years old. Laurence Krauss actually says that if you are going to do that to your child, that it's actually child abuse. I was able to find this clip here. We'll listen to what Richard Dawkins has to say. And these are the people that are pushing so heavily on what is going to be called the curriculum in our schools. They are the ones that are giving the information in the universities that's being handed down to young teachers that want to teach your children. And notice the attitude, notice the demeanor that is felt, that is shown towards Christians. But yet remember, it's these individuals, it's Richard Dawkins and Laurence Krauss and the science guys, that they're all about talk. We need to be loving and understanding and all that warm and fuzzy stuff. You see, they just want you to be tolerant towards their position. But if you go against their position, guess what? They're not going to be very tolerant towards you.
Anybody who thinks that the world is 10,000 years old, there's an enormous number of creationists, especially in America, but not only in America, do think. The best excuse for them is lament ignorance. Ignorance is no crime, but it's something to be remedied by education. Anybody who is not ignorant, anybody who's been shown the fact and still believes the world is less than 10,000 years old, there's got to be something wrong with them.
So you're either ignorant or there's just something wrong with you. That doesn't sound very tolerant to me. That sounds, like he's trying to belittle. And after all, he has no evidence of his own. If you remember the program a couple weeks ago with Dad and Caleb, they, went through with Richard Dawkins and a Catholic, I believe his name was Pale, and Richard Dawkins was stumbling all over himself. How he was promoting, okay, science has all this evidence, but you know what? There's a bunch of gaps that we're still trying to figure out. Science has it figured out, but yet there's so much that we don't. What is that? That's a bunch of double talk. And it's the same double talk that's being given to our young people, and the young people are being told by Richard Dawkins, a scientist, I have been well studied in all these different areas. I read and I'm up to date on all matters. You can trust me. You can listen to me. And guess what? The children are saying, okay, Mom and Daddy sent me here to listen to you. Mom and Daddy must trust you. I'm going to. And it's ruining the minds of our young people. The entire school system within itself is not designed to bring about free thinkers, but instead is designed purely to bring about a people that is going to be subservient, that's going to be allow themselves to be put under the rule of somebody else.
To give an idea of the magnitude of the error, to believe that the world is less than 10,000 years old, given that we know the world is actually 4.6 billion years old, it's equivalent to believing that the width of North America, right across from New York to San Francisco, is less than 10 yards. And that's the scale of the error we're talking about. So you've either got to be staggeringly ignorant, which most of them are, or if you're not ignorant, insane. I think that religious upbringing is immensely powerful, and if it's hammered into as a young child, it can be really quite difficult to get rid of in later life, especially if, when you were a child, you were told, the devil will come and try to persuade you of error, remain steadfast, don't listen. Sometimes they were even told things like, don't believe when people bring something they call evidence. Faith is more important than evidence. I mean, it's really a really appalling stranglehold that these archaic beliefs have on minds that have been warped since childhood. It's such a privilege to understand where we come from, a privilege that's granted to those of us who live after 1859, that to deny children that privilege is wicked. It's a deprivation which should not be visited on any child, and the truth is so staggeringly exciting. It really is an enormously exciting thought that we are cousins of all living creatures, that we have a history of 4 billion years of slow, gradual evolution. Just think about 4 billion years.
Now, he's just mentioned that if you believe in creationism, that you're ignorant, and that if you remain in your ignorance, you're presented with evidence, you're presented with the facts, and you continue to, not believe the truth, and you're completely insane. And then for a parent to teach such stuff, or as he, as I'm sure as he would look at it, as garbage, to teach such garbage to a young person, to your child, in fact, is depriving them. You are being abusive to a child. Laurence Krauss actually makes the concept that in his segment on Think Big, it's a channel on YouTube, or Big Thinkers or something like that, if you wanted to look that up. He actually says that to hold this type of position is in fact child abuse, and luckily on it, and we'll just let you listen to Laurence Krauss and how he looks at Christians, how he looks at those who hold to what the Bible teaches. And friends, you don't think this type of attitude is being brought upon your children when they go to school and they start talking about the Bible and they start talking about Jesus? If the documentary had gone a little further, there is a segment given to a teacher, a young teacher who actually had to resign from her position because of all the things that were going on in the public school system at which she was teaching. And she tells about how that 2 children on the playground, 8 years old, 2 children in the playground were confronted by another teacher because one student said to the other student, well, that's gay, or you're gay, or something to that effect. And the teacher came up and, very quickly ran up and tried to get in the middle of it and started beriding the other child because he called the other child gay. and started giving that child up the road because he should not have said that. And then actually said to the child, and another reason why you shouldn't be calling him gay is because, you know what? He could be gay. And then she looked and turned to the child and said, you could be gay. Now, is that the kind of influence that you're wanting to be put upon your child? An impressionable mind, a mind that is just ready to take in information? Do you want some stranger telling your child you might be a homosexual? And then for these educated men to say, you know what? If you're going to teach creationism, if you're going to teach people, you don't need to be teaching them that. Friends, who are we to be telling you how to raise your children? Are you not seeing what's happening right before your eyes? We need to take our heads out of the proverbial sand, if you will. Stop trying to, cover our eyes and cover our mouths and cover our ears like those three little, see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. We need to start raising a fuss so as to regain our young people. Now listen to what Laurence Krauss has to say.
It amazes me that people have pre-existing notions that defy the evidence of reality, but that they hold on to them so dearly. And one of them is of creationism, or in fact, look, Senator Marco Rubio, who's presumably a reasonably intelligent man, and maybe even educated, was asked, what's the age of the Earth? And ultimately, either because he actually believed it, or he was trying to appeal to some constituency, had to argue that it's a big mystery, that somehow we should teach kids both ideas that the Earth is 6,000 years old and that it's 4.55 billion years old, which is what it is. If you think about that, somehow saying that, well, anything goes, we shouldn't offend religious beliefs by requiring kids to know, to understand reality. That's child abuse.
Now, he is actually saying if you're going to teach your child that the Earth is, in fact, he said 6,000 years old, when in fact it's 4.5 billion years old, to hold that truth from your child about the billions and billions of years of existence in the evolutionary process, to hold that from your child is child abuse. Now, friends, before the documentary cut off, you were hearing a discuss, how easily the drug Ritalin is being spread throughout the public school system. In the book Indoctrination, which I have here, and I read that chapter discussing the drug use that's being pushed on our young children and throughout our schools. Friends, it's frightening. The fact that ADHD is not at all a disease which can be qualified by certain symptoms. I actually list the symptoms here in this book. I'll just go ahead and read off the symptoms for you. I do not have them pictured in the presentation. I was not planning on discussing it, but since it was brought up and not finished, I think it is necessary for us to do so. Some of the symptoms by which they diagnose a person to have ADHD. On page 44 of Indoctrination, ADHD, a diagnosis in search of a disease. What are these symptoms? Here are the 9 symptoms for the inattention form of ADHD. Number 1, often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes with schoolwork, work, or other activities. I cannot tell you the number of times that I made careless mistakes on a math test. So, according to this, just the first one, I could be diagnosed with ADHD. Often has difficulty sustaining attention to task or play activities. There have been times where my mind has wandered during different classes and during different activities. So I possibly could have ADHD. Often does not seem to listen when too directly. Just the other day, Dad was trying to tell me something, and I was off in another world. So I guess I'm on my way to give me a prescription of Ritalin. Often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace, not due to oppositional behavior or failure to understand instruction. Often has difficulty organizing tasks and activities. Often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort. For example, schoolwork or homework. Often loses things necessary for tasks or activities. Is often easily distracted by extraneous stimuli. Is often forgetful in daily activities. Now that's for ADHD. Friends, that sounds just like being a young person. That sounds just like the symptoms of being a child. These things are common in young people. The symptoms of the hyperactivity impulsivity form of ADHD are often fidgets, hands or feet, or squirms in seat. You know, when I was first reading this book, I was sitting down and I had one leg crossed over the other, and guess what my leg was doing? It was crossed in the air. It was, you know, it was moving. Oftentimes when I'm reading, if I have a pen in my hand, I'm tapping as I'm reading. Or I might be, clicking a pen. It got on my nerves the other day. Friends, these are just normal things that we as human beings do, but guess what? Somebody finds discomfort in this, and they say, you know what, we've got to find a remedy for this. And the remedy is a drug by which they don't even know what the symptoms are on the mind of a young developing mind. They have no clue what this medication is doing to your young child, and there are actually accounts in this book given where parents had to take their children off of the medication, and the schools actually got child protective services involved and tried to have their children taken away. Were you aware that the school system has that much power? That if the school system wanted to, they could have your children taken away from you. Because you, as the parent of that child, the parental guardian of that child, you do not want that child on medication. But the school wants them on the medication, and guess what? If they want them on the medication, they'll have them taken from you. There's at least 3 cases listed in this book where that actually happened. How is this happening to us? Because of men like this. Laurence Krauss, Richard Dawkins, Bill Nye the Science Guy, in their view of how the world is supposed to be run and is being pushed through the public school system. If our producer will go ahead and put the phone lines up, we'll take some calls. We'll hear what you have to say on this subject. And while we're waiting on the calls to come in, we'll read through some excerpts of this book, because, friends, it gets even scarier from here. I will have to do, again, this presenter mode is throwing my show out of whack, and I will try to make do the best that I possibly can, and trying to make sure that we can read this together, but I can see now that it's just not going to work. So hopefully on another show, we'll get the kinks worked out, and just for now, you'll have to trust me that what I'm reading is actually in this book. Good evening, caller. You're on What Does the Bible Say? There you go.
Micah, did I understand you say that we're becoming like a communist country?
Yes, sir. That is actually the design. We look at public school system and how it was run in Prussia, especially by the modern fathers of education. They were all communist in their background.
And you think it's being taught in the public school system today?
I know for sure that it's being taught in the public school system today.
Oh, yeah. I know you were talking about the gay kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the alternative lifestyles is taught in the public school system today. And I know that's part of the communist agenda. In fact, our present president was traveling the world using the embassies to promote this agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's what he was doing here. I read about it in a religious magazine about it.
Yes, sir.
But what you will hold you longer, I want to tell you something. For 40-some years, we've been watching this go on. And if you go back to World War I, you'll see how these people came in into this country from Prussia, or as you said, Germany,
mm-hmm.
who got into our universities and everywhere else. And they've been working in this country ever since World War I. Ritalin is just as key to opening the doors that's going to lead you to other drugs. And they wanted a lot of children in the public schools to be on Ritalin so they could control them and use them like sheep and direct them and do this and do that, do the other. But you're talking about this as people that I've been associated with for 40-some years have been watching the educational system in this country. and everything else that goes under that. It comes out of the National Education Association out of Washington, D.C. And places that we have been speaking up and fighting to change it back where parents do have control of their children, but the NEA has got a lot of people, like you said a minute ago, they will lock you if you don't watch what they do, because they want control of your children and their young minds so they can indoctrinate them into a world that they plan on having this country in probably within the next 20 years. But enjoying your show. But yeah, you were going right down the street that I have walked down for a long time and recognized this for 40-some years of my life, how this stuff has been put in place and is ruining the minds of young Americans and what it's done to the children of this country. And you wonder why, what's going on today in society, that's as a problem. And Madeline O'Hare knew that too when she took the flag to schools with 27,000 signatures. So a better little religion is better than none whatsoever. So some kids were getting some moral guidance.
Right.
Back doing that, because I was in the school system at that time, and I do remember them teaching it. But I appreciate you for the time and enjoy the show.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, and friends, and like I said, I will try to hopefully bring this information on another show where all the kinks are worked out, because he was asking me if I believe that we're becoming a communist country, and if I believe that this is being pushed on the schools. The Humanist Manifestos, Humanist Manifesto number 1 and Humanist Manifesto number 2, and they actually wrote another one in 2006, the Humanist Manifesto number 3. And guess where they got the majority of their tenets, or where a lot of their thought process came from? But from the Communist Manifesto, from Karl Marx, from his ideal utopia type of thinking and what the world could be under a socialist type of government. And in a socialist government, it's the idea that, everybody is the same across all levels. No person has any more goods or any more riches than another person. And friends, on paper, that sounds wonderful. That sounds like the ideal place to live. But in their line of thinking, that in order to get to the spot, you had to remove forms of religion, especially the religion of Christianity. Some of them look at it, view it as Judeo-Christianity, the God Jehovah, and the exclusivity that is found within Christianity, that not just anybody can be a Christian, but you have to keep to a certain amount of rules. This is being taught in the universities. And to bring out some examples from the research that has been done by those who involved in writing this book and also in making of the documentary, Chuck Laverde, he's an individual. He holds a BS in structural engineering from the University of California in San Diego. He writes, like many of America's youngsters today, I started attending a public school around age 4, kindergarten. Unlike of my classmates, I was blessed to have a stay-at-home mom, and she was steadily involved with my schooling throughout those early years. And friends, I believe that's one of the largest areas where we have gone off as a country. Not at all trying to say that a woman just belongs in the home and that she has no right to go out and to work a secular job, but I believe that that's where a lot of our problems have originated. When the mothers left the home, when moms and dads are so busy outside of the home to where they cannot tend to their own children, guess who gets put in place of watching the children? The schools, the television, Hollywood, the news, the propaganda that they want to, spew across the screen, and then their peers, their friends, who, guess what, are being watched by the schools and who are being, watched by the television. They are infecting our children, and it's just, it's one big cycle, it's one big circle. Good evening, caller. You're on What's the Bible Say?
Hey, Micah. How you doing tonight? I really hate that your documentary didn't play all the way. I think people on their own should go and really watch it to see what all is going on. I just wanted to point out one thing I doubt people know in Virginia is for their kids that are in public school, I think you're about 6 or 7 when you're in the first grade, that's when they're starting to teach your children sex ed.
Right.
Fine. first grade, the child is going to be able to identify or be shown a human's genitals on a chart. And by second grade, they start to name them. They can know all what they're called and everything like that. And by the time a child gets to fifth grade, they're going to know everything that takes place in a marriage bedroom. Now, I mean, by the time you're fifth grade, what are you, 10 or 11?
About that age, yeah.
Why do you need to move on that?
A child at that age has absolutely no need in knowing that information, but all it is just, if you can get a person comfortable in thinking about it and talking about it, well, then they're going to be comfortable with doing it. The Proverbs writer, wrote, "So a man thinketh in his heart, or as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is." So if you can get a young child actually on this topic and on this discussion at a young age, well, by the time they're at the age where they're ready to investigate and to experiment, which is actually what they're wanting them to do. The sex education is supposed to be about abstinence, but so much about the sex education is, well, here's what it is. Now go and experiment to find out what it is that you and.
Right, and they all act surprised. In the video, I can't remember what the girl said, but she said at least by high school, she said we start hearing more and more people. Why do you think that's happening?
Because, just like you said, because at elementary age in the school systems, they're already being groomed to go out and to act upon their desires and upon their urges.
Yeah, and just one more thing that you had mentioned before. I mean, I don't know how many hours in a day, 5 days a week, 9 out of the 12 months of the year, they're with these people that we don't know who they are, and we don't know what they're teaching. Can you remember the exact number of years Larry Serber said he taught the 4th grade?
Oh, I cannot. It seems like it was over 25. It might have been around 30.
Okay, I was thinking it was close to 18 or 20 years teaching. Now, you have someone that's teaching your child, different children every year for at least 18 years, and what's he telling them? We know what he had said in real life.
Right.
I smoke truckloads of pot. I'd like to watch lesbians. Now, when a child asked him, asked the teacher that would be like Larry Serber, the atheist, and he's, well, I'm having issues with sexuality. I'm having, issues with drugs. What's that person going to tell them?
Hey, it's just, it's your prerogative. What's the problem?
Yeah, and just more people, if they would realize this, more people in America need to look at Ephesians chapter 6, to where we're supposed to train children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
Right.
We talk about denominations where, we're not going according to the Bible, but people need to wake up and realize you're going to have to answer just as much for raising your children as everything else you do in life.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, if we seem like we're becoming a bit overzealous with this information, there are only a few things that really make me upset and that make me angry. And friends, brethren, this is one of them. To think about young children being misled and being abused and not even given a chance to succeed spiritually, and the idea that they're having their innocence removed at such a young age. If you remember the beginning part of that documentary, he gave the man by the last name of Gunn, who was driving the school bus, he gave a lot of close-up shots of his children, and to see how happy those children were, and just how pure and innocent and without any type of blemish that they were, and then to think, well just to keep custom, just because it's the American thing to do, public school system, that's just a part of being an American, I'm going to sacrifice that innocence just for the sake of keeping up a tradition, keeping up a custom. Brethren, friends, it's disturbing. And to think that this is how our government is misusing their power, their influence, so as to indoctrinate our young people. And ultimately, just, you know, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of excitement shows that are dealing with zombies, The Walking Dead. They are breeding their own zombies. When it comes to political and social beings, they are nothing but governmental zombies. Good evening, you're on What Bible Say.
Yeah, just want to call back, Mike. I saw you kind of got upset there a minute. If you were a parent back when my children were young, and you had no control over them whatsoever, and you knew and recognized that the school system was teaching lies, you went to the school and you talked to them, they would have you arrested, locked up, like you said earlier, take your children away from you. And I have seen parents all around Pennsylvania County and North Carolina who tried to help their children. That's reason in private schools today, because the public school system is nothing but for a place to indoctrinate and warp of, like you said, first grade children. That's when they start. And I've had friends of mine who have been carried out because they tried to stop it. We even went to Richmond about it, tried to get something done years ago, back in the early 90s.
Right.
To talk to people. But what you're saying is correct, and people need to wake up. But I don't know if it's too late for this or not. But you're right. Stay on this. Thank you a lot.
All right, thank you. And, you know, just, you know, to continue on a thought in which he said there, you know, wondering if it's too late. I have in my possession, this is a book that I just recently ordered, because, friends, the scary thing about this type of information is when you start doing your research, you would be surprised just how deep that hole goes. When you do your research, and I was reading through this book, and it started telling me about, you know, different things that you could find on the internet, you know, different articles that you could read. Well, guess what? When you read those articles, they're telling you about different books. When you read that, finding about, you know, other books of different things that are being promoted throughout the school system by the Educational Board in Washington. I just recently bought this book, and it's pictured here on the screen, Queering Elementary Education. Friends, you do not think that your elementary children are being indoctrinated, that they're being taught by the humanist movement, the communists, the socialists, that we just need to all, you know, just drop our religious beliefs and just, you know, let each other live as we want to live? Is that, you know, is this is the book that's being promoted. In this book, the foreword is written by Kevin Jennings. Now, you might not be familiar with that name, but Kevin Jennings is the czar, or was the czar, of education when President Obama was first put into office. Kevin Jennings is an open homosexual. He is the follower of Harris Hay, who is a promoter of NAMBLA, which is North American Man-Boy Love, and it's, you know, it's a group for pedophiles, trying to get them eat with the homosexuals. This is the man that our president has put in charge, deeming different materials fit for your children to read while they're in school, and also deeming fit what the teachers are to be taught so that they can teach your children what they want to be taught. This book is written by Kevin Jennings, the head of the educational, or was the head of the Educational Supervising Committee in Washington, and he wrote the foreword to Queering Elementary Education, advancing the dialogue about sexualities and schooling. Now, just like the caller made mention a moment ago, why does an elementary student need to know about this? And do you want your elementary student knowing about homosexuality, lesbianism, bisexuality, and transgender? What gives them the right that they think that they can teach your children whatever they want to? And friends, this is going on. We need to stand up against this idea that, you know what, public school is the option. The caller a moment ago, you know, brought up, you know, private schooling. In the book, or in this book, Indoctrination, the gentleman that I was reading from just a moment ago, Chuck Laverde, he talks about, you know, being taken to public school and being put into a private school, and he said, you know, the troubles didn't disappear. the troubles just there was a little bit different in them. In public school, you had people smoking dope and sniffing glue, and going to the private school where they've got more money, and guess what? They're dropping ecstasy and they're using heroin. So you're running into the same problems, just a richer version of these problems. Good evening, caller. You're on What's the Bible Say?
Good evening, Micah. I'm not sure what the practice was in West Virginia in public schools, but when I was in elementary school in the state of New York, it was customary for kids to dress up on Halloween in costumes and go trick-or-treating.
Mm-hmm.
And the school system would hand out what were essentially little cardboard containers, and they were for you to also ask for money for an organization known as UNICEF. UNICEF was run by the United Nations, and the money was supposed to go to help children in foreign countries. Well, in the 90s, if anybody remembers, or if anybody was privy to the information, UNICEF was handing out pamphlets in some of these third world nations, instructing on how to have safe sex with animals. So there's another way where an institution comes through the school system, the children know nothing about it, and they're set out to promote it and to ask for money or simply beg for money, and never knowing what that organization promotes.
Right.
And you also brought up the fact that, there's a lot of single moms and they're working, and, if they don't have a father or a husband in the household who is supporting the family, well, then they pretty much have to do that to support their children.
Right.
But the real question is where are the fathers? Where are the husbands? And what does the school say about families without husbands or families that are single parent in position? They promote that as well.
Right.
And one other thing, it goes beyond public school and it goes beyond into higher education. Student loan debt now has surpassed private credit card debt in this country. And yet, you can get out of school with a BA, a BS, or even an MBA, and be left to work for a job that you didn't have to go to college at all for, and you still have to pay off thousands or tens of dollars worth of loan debt back to the government.
Right.
Thank you for your broadcast.
All right, thank you for the call. And, friends, that is the world in which we are living. It's this idea that, if I don't know, then I don't care. We are needing to become more involved, especially as Christians. One of the duties as a Christian is we are supposed to be intrusive. Now, I know today that that mentality is, truly foreign to us. But if we are going to do our jobs properly, I believe James Oldfield, he brought this information out very, very well on his program this past Thursday on the Word from the Lord, in discussing how that, Christians are we're watchmen. We are individuals set up on a tower. We are to be, on guard at all times, and in order to be on guard, we have to be watching. If we see something that's out of place, guess what? We need to engage. And parents, you need to be aware what is going on in your children's school. Now, the scary thing about it is, as the caller has made reference to over and over again, he knows of people that have tried to get involved in what their children are being taught, and they have been threatened with lawsuits. They have been threatened to have their children removed from their care. In this book, again, in Indoctrination, it talks about an occurrence in Charleston, West Virginia, where the public schools was trying to bring in different kinds of literature into the school system, and the town, they protested. They marched, they rallied, they went to the state capitol, they did everything that they could legally do so as to not have books come into their school system and corrupt their children. And guess what happened? Do you think they won? No, they didn't win. The government knew well what the people wanted, or what they did not want rather, and guess what? The government just ignored the wishes of the people. Friends, we are, people are saying we are losing our rights. Our rights are already gone. And what we are needing to question now, and I'm questioning within myself, are we going to be so tied to this country like the Jews were tied to Jerusalem? When Jesus came on the scene and he was teaching, one of the things that he was teaching to the Jews was Jerusalem is going to fall. The Romans are going to come in and they're going to sack Jerusalem to the point that the temple is not going to be left standing. Your entire world, everything that makes up your existence is going to be gone. They had warning after warning after warning, but guess what? The Jews did not want to believe it. They were so tied to their national religion, they were so tied to their patriotism, and millions of Jews lost their lives when Rome came in and destroyed Jerusalem. I believe we have to start asking ourselves the question, especially those of us who are Christians. Are we going to be so tied to this country that as we see it to continue to crumble and to fall, that we're not going to leave it when the time comes necessary? I'm not willing to go down with this ship. I'm not afraid to country and preach the gospel there. I could go to Africa. I could go to India, where people are actually wanting to receive the gospel. I could go to, Jamaica. I know places in Guyana where works are going on. I could go back to the Marshalls and live just as happily there in spreading the gospel to people that actually want it. The government and those that are in charge, the people that are in officiating positions, they have done their job very well. This is not something that is just, coming upon us, spur of the moment, but this is something that has been in the works over centuries. And the reason why they have been able to make such progress is because we have trusted them. Instead of trusting in God and what He says is right and what He deems to be correct and deems to be just, we have been putting our trust, and I say we generally, we as Americans, we have been putting our trust in our United States government to take care of us. And guess what? The chickens are coming home to roost. Who the Bible says should prepare children? When you go back through the Old Testament, it's laid out very clearly. Exodus chapter 12, beginning verse 26. And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service? Well, who are they coming to? Well, they're coming to the parents. When your children come and ask you questions, that ye shall say. It doesn't say, you send them off to, you send them off to school, you send them off to teachers, and you let them teach them. No, when the children ask you questions, that ye, the parents, shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the house of the children of Israel in Egypt when He smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed and they worshipped the Lord. Also, again, in Joshua chapter in verse 6, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what mean ye by these stones? Then ye, the parents, shall answer them that the wind were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it passed over Jordan, and the waters of Jordan were cut off, and the stone remained here. Friends, you need to get involved in your children's life. You're going to be held responsible for the outcome of your child. That child has been born to you and been put into your care. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 7, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. Friends, brethren, we need to wake up to what it is that's actually going on around us. It's 10:30. I certainly do appreciate those who called in, those who have been viewed, and I hope that the information, some might be looking at it and saying, well, you know what, this information is very scary. Good. I hope it scares you to death. It scares me to death. About bringing a child into this world, and this is, the things in which they're going to deal. It scares me to death. It makes me, to the point where to think about it would be the cruelest thing that could be done at this time. But I believe that if we start standing again as we used to, as we once were, and it might be the case we might have to leave, or so be it. But as long as we continue to stand strong with God, promote His gospel, and promote, there will be a remnant whereby, turn things around. Again, I apologize for the difficulty that came, different equipment that I was using. Hopefully I'll have another opportunity to present this information, and hopefully just has you hungry to receive more of it. Thank you for watching. Always ask for what does the Bible say, and you get the word from the Lord. Have a good night.
ACP and ACLU are suing, saying the laws violate the Voting Rights Act and claim to suppress African American voters. Let's begin this discussion with the Constitution. Article 6, Sections 1 and 2 prescribe that any person who's a naturalized citizen, 18 years of age or older, has lived in our state for a year, has in a precinct for the past 30 days, is eligible to vote. It then delegates to the legislature the power to set any other specifics regarding the elections. So are these lawsuits based on the plaintiffs not believing the legislature has the authority to make these decisions, that the decisions violate the Federal Voting Rights Act laws, or what?
Well, I think the plaintiffs believe that the legislation in question violated one Constitution that's being litigated in state court, and it also violated the Voting Rights Act and Federal Constitution.